So far, we've talked about Okinawa, we've talked about the Nicoya region of Costa Rica, we talked about Sardinia, and we've talked about Icaria. The last one is Loma Linda. And I saved the best for last, guys, for a couple of reasons. Let's talk about Loma Linda. Loma Linda is a region of longevity in California. Loma Lindans tend to live 7 years longer than the average Californian. It's true. But a couple of things are problematic with this assertion. The other thing I should mention is that Loma Linda is a concentration of Seventh-day Adventists. This is a religious group that believes that meat will contribute to carnal desires, which is probably true. If you want to have a real libido, you probably should eat meat. There's actually a fascinating history of Seventh-day Adventists and the movement around this with Harvey Kellogg, the origins of Kellogg's cereals, and the real probable reality that Kellogg's was developing cereals to quell masturbation, to quell carnal desires by giving people garbage, processed cornmeal flakes, which were devoid in the nutrients needed to make sex hormones. So one way to chemically castrate yourself is to eat a lot of cornflakes or a plant-based diet. It's happened before. If you guys listen to the podcast I'd done a long time ago with Tim Sheaf, a world-class free runner, and Elise Parker, two recovering highly prominent vegans, you'll hear from both of them that after 4 or 5 years on a vegan diet, their libidos were shot. And when both of them incorporated meat into their diet, they found a resurgence. They basically both thought they were asexual. They're not together. They're independent people that I interviewed together. And they both found a resurgence in their sex hormones. And they found this to be quite pleasant, that they actually had sexual desire as a healthy human should have in their life. Tim Sheaf's story is particularly remarkable. I remember when this happened a few years ago, he was actually shooting with the movie Game Changers. Like I said, he's a world champion free runner. And he asked them to take him out of the movie because he was doing so poorly on a vegan diet and then felt so much better when he included salmon in his diet. I remember that he talked about this on social media. The first time he ate salmon, he had a wet dream. So he had resurgence of sexuality and hormones for the first time in many, many years. Again, Elise talked about it on the podcast. She felt like she was asexual, began eating salmon and then red meat, and recovered a healthy sex drive for a young mid to late 20s woman. We should all have this late into our life, I believe. And so again, Kellogg's, Seventh-day Adventists, what's a very effective way to chemically castrate humans? Well, give them cornflakes. So let's just put all religious discussions aside and judgments and just say, okay, the Seventh-day Adventists are concerned about carnal desires. And so I believe, and I could be wrong about this, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is part of the connection with these vegetarian and vegan diets, is they may help to curb libido. Well, many of us actually like our libido when used appropriately and responsibly, and prefer to be a healthy human. That is vital. If you choose a plant-based diet to curb your libido, then that is your choice, but that's not my choice. And I don't think that's many of the choices. I don't think that's a choice for many of you listening to this podcast. Nevertheless, let's go back to the Seventh-day Adventists. Let's go back to Loma Linda. One thing to consider is that there are many regions of California, or I should say there are other populations of Californians who also experience the same longevity benefits, lifestyle and reduced mortality among California Mormons, 1980 to 2004. But the California Mormons they're dispersed throughout California. They don't live in a specific area. This is not considered to be a blue zone or a blue population, but they do have decreased mortality. They do live on average about the same as the Loma Lindans, 7 years longer than the general Californian population. Oh, how strange. Imagine that. What do the California Mormons and Loma Lindans have in common? Well, associated with their religion, these Californian Seventh-day Adventists also are health-conscious religious groups. They say it right here. Other health-conscious religious groups like the Seventh-day Adventists and frequent church attenders in general also have substantially reduced mortality rates. Could this possibly be due to abstaining from smoking, having good health practices, staying married, having community? Yes, it could. Again, this is what I'm talking about with healthy user bias, or these healthy behaviors that actually infer a longevity benefit rather than the avoidance of meat, because we see that these California Mormons live just as long as the Loma Lindans, and they do not shun meat in any way, shape, or form. So again, this throws further questioning, further skepticism to the idea of the blue zones, when one of the key blue zones, the Loma Linda, doesn't even really look to be that special. And let's ask the finally important question about Loma Linda. And many of you may have heard me talk about this last study, or this study that I'm going to show right now before. Is there a decreased in health outcomes, or is there any potential problem with eating a vegan or vegetarian diet in Loma Linda? Do the Loma Lindans, the Seventh-day Adventist community who shun meat, have any problems with doing this relative to the Mormons who are eating meat? And the answer appears to be yes, very possibly. So food intake, diet, and sperm characteristics in a blue zone. They even put it in the freaking title of this paper, guys, a Loma Linda study. This study showed that vegetables-based food intake decreased sperm quality. In particular, a reduction in sperm quality in male factor patients would be clinically significant, would require review. Furthermore, inadequate sperm hyperactivation in vegans suggested compromised membrane calcium selective channels. Now, important to note that in this study, they had trouble they had trouble recruiting strict vegans. There were 5 strict vegans. There were 26 lacto-ovo-vegetarians. And overall, I believe there were 443 non-vegetarians. So would love to see the study repeated with larger numbers, but this finding has been replicated in other populations. And we see that there is a correlation between increased plant and vegetable intake and decreased sperm quality. Perhaps the Loma Lindans in this study are the extreme example there, with the complete exclusion of meat being very harmful for the sperm quality. Again, it's a low numbers in those other people, 26 and 5 respectively for vegetarian and vegans. There's a lot of potential hypotheses here. Is it a deficiency of carnitine, which is necessary for sperm hyperactivation? Again, this is one of these nutrients only found in meat. Is it increased pesticides that are unable to be detoxified or that are accumulating in the body because of this increased intake of vegetables? Who knows? But that to me, and I've joked about this before, you guys have probably heard this joke, that to me suggests that Loma Linda is not really a blue zone, or if it is a blue zone, I don't know what's blue other than maybe the testicles of these men who are not having good sperm motility. So it's a blue ball zone, perhaps, not a blue zone in terms of longevity. So again, we've gone through all 5 of Dan Buettner's precious, celebrated, sacrosanct blue zones now: Icaria, Sardinia, Okinawa, Loma Linda, and the Nicaraguan region of Costa Rica. And what we've seen is that, hey, all of these regions, they are eating meat except for Loma Linda. And when they don't eat meat, they have the same longevity, which is mirrored by Mormons in California who are eating meat, and the sperm quality in Loma Linda is not so good. Tell me again why blue zones are valuable, or why anyone reputable would ever say that plant-based diets in blue zones account for any sort of longevity, or that a plant-based diet in a blue zone is any correlation that's worth looking at. Tell me again why that is. I don't know. It makes me crazy, and yet it gets repeated and parroted so often that I think it just continues to mislead so many and really lead to, I fear, decreased or really negative health outcomes for so many. So this is why I do this work. I think that there's a real narrative here. We want to believe this fairy tale. The blue zones concept is brilliant, right? It's a genius marketing term. This blue zone concept is magical. It's Atlantis. It's this city of gold, this Mayan fairy tale, except it doesn't exist. There are blue zones, but they're probably regions where there are clusters of favorable genetics, or laid-back lifestyles, or increased sun, or decreased seed oil consumption. That may be the main thing that we can do for longevity. And saying that there are plant-based diets associated with this is just bollocks and should not be respected and should be challenged, as I'm doing at length in this podcast.